I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Economics Report. America's biggest car maker accepted $50 billion in federal aid from the Obama and Bush administrations. People joked that GM meant government motors. Now General Motors could be on the road to recovery. The company recorded over $2.5 billion in profit in the first half of the year. The government still owns 61% of GM as a result of the bailout. Canada is also a shareholder. But now GM plans to sell stock to the public again. GM spent just 40 days in bankruptcy. It sought protection from its creditors in June of last year. GM restructured. It discontinued some vehicles and closed dealerships and factories. In April, GM repaid almost $7 billion in government loans. Many of its creditors are waiting to see how much they get. GM plans an IPO, an initial public offering of stock, later this year. The company could raise as much as $15 billion. Chief Executive Edward Whittaker left the company September 1st. He wants the government to sell all of its shares in the company during the IPO. Many experts believe the Treasury will act slowly over time after the public offering is completed. If the stock price rises, the government could profit from the rescue. But the IPO is risky for the company. The offering will test the willingness of investors to take an equity share in the new GM. Buying equity is not like buying bonds. Bonds represent a loan. Equity represents ownership. Investors willing to buy equity shares in a company expect one thing: growth. GM believes it can make that happen, in part with a new electric and gas hybrid car. The Chevrolet Volt can go up to 64 kilometers before it uses any gas at all. The Volt is expected to start arriving in showrooms later this year. GM is also looking overseas. The world's fastest-growing car markets are in developing nations. GM is now selling more cars in China than in the United States. GM still leads the American market, although Toyota is now the biggest car company in the world. There are signs that America's big three car makers may have put the worst of their recent troubles behind them. Chrysler also went through bankruptcy and says its sales are up. Italy's Fiat holds a 20% share. Ford Motor Company avoided bankruptcy and refused government help. Ford reported close to $5 billion in profit for the first 6 months of the year. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. The best example of something is often called the gold standard. It sets the standard against which other things are measured. In economics, the term describes how major trading nations once used gold to set currency values and exchange rates. Many nations continued to use the gold standard until the last century. In the United States, people could exchange paper money for gold from the 1870s until 1933. President Richard Nixon finally disconnected the dollar from the value of gold in 1971. Some politicians from time to time call for a return to the gold standard. But in 1978, the International Monetary Fund ended an official gold price. The IMF also ended the required use of gold in transactions with its member countries. Since that time, gold prices have grown, but unevenly. Prices, uncorrected for inflation, have hit record highs recently, above $1,400 an ounce. But people keep buying. Nyang Chan Nguyen is a gold shop owner in the Cambodian capital, Phnom Penh, and says, "Some of my customers have even bought more as they believe the price will probably go higher. I sell more gold at these higher prices." Some people are gold bugs. These are investors who say people should buy gold to protect against inflation. People have valued gold for thousands of years. The soft, dense metal polishes to a bright yellow shine and resists most chemical reactions. It makes a good material for money, political power, and, more recently, electrical power. If you own a device like a mobile phone or a computer, you might own a little gold in the wiring. The gold standard was the subject of one of the best-known speeches in American political history. It took place at the 1896 Democratic National Convention in Chicago. William Jennings Bryan wanted the country to use both gold and silver as money. The idea was to devalue the dollar and make it easier for farmers to pay their debts. Bryan said, "You shall not press down upon the brow of labor this crown of thorns. You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold." This speech made William Jennings Bryan famous. He was a presidential candidate 3 times, but he never won. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. You can learn more about the world every day and learn English at the same time at voaspecialenglish.com. You can also connect with us on Facebook and Twitter at VOA Learning English.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. China says it has passed Germany and become the world's top exporter. Exports totaled more than $1 trillion last year. That was down from 2008, but about 30 billion more than Germany. China's influence in the world has increased with its fast-growing economy. The United States remains the largest economy. China is third and gaining on Japan. Manufacturing has expanded, fueling exports. But China has not imported as much as its trade partners would like. Its policies about valuing its currency and its human rights record have also created tensions. And now there is a new dispute. China is the world's largest internet market, but Google says it may leave. The company said it was targeted by a major internet attack launched from China in December. It says intellectual property was stolen, and the attackers sought access to Gmail accounts of Chinese human rights activists. At least 20 other large companies in different industries were also targeted. Also, the company said it is no longer willing to censor search results as required by Chinese law. Google says it is still observing censorship laws, but it will hold talks with the government in the coming weeks. Google.cn launched 4 years ago. Google is estimated to have around a 30% share of the search market in China. But that is only about half the share of the Chinese search engine Baidu. Baidu also reported an attack on its website in January. Online advertising sales in China are estimated to bring Google only a few $100 million a year. Not much for such a big company, notes business expert Fariborz Gadar at Penn State University. He says Google has to make a decision. It can stay in China, or it can move out so as to protect its name and brand because of the restrictions and cyber attacks. Online activity in China is closely watched, and the government tries to limit access to many sites, including VOA. In January, a foreign ministry spokeswoman said China's internet is open and that Chinese law bars cyber attacks. Another government official said China itself is the victim of a growing number of foreign attacks. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said she would like an explanation from the Chinese about Google's accusations. And that's the VOA Special English Economics Report. You can find more reports about economics at voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. The Olympic flame was lit in Greece on May 10th. The ceremony marked the beginning of a long trip through Greece and Britain, which holds the Summer Olympics this year. Greece has been at the center of a political and economic struggle that also threatens other European economies. It remains unclear if Greece will continue using the euro or if its Eurozone partners can enact reforms needed to hold the currency group together. On the day the Olympic flame was lit, Greek socialist leader Evangelos Venizelos began an attempt to form a new government. It marked the third attempt to form a government in the week after parliamentary elections. Mr. Venizelos' PASOK party finished third in the elections. First, the conservative New Democracy Party attempted to form a government and failed. Then, the leader of the leftist Syriza coalition tried and failed. He said the election results showed the Greek people had rejected deep budget cuts required by international creditors. Budget-cutting austerity measures have angered Greeks. The political situation in Greece raised the possibility of the need for an emergency coalition or even new elections. The political crisis also raised the possibility of punishment by Greece's Eurozone creditors. They could deny future payments from the financial rescue plan that they agreed to in February. The agreement is worth about $170 billion in loans and canceled debt. The rescue is the second for Greece since its debt crisis began in 2009 and bigger than the first bailout. On May 10th, Euro area governments released a $5.5 billion loan to Greece. But Greek officials were said to have been unhappy that over $1 billion was withheld. The failed efforts to form a government raised concerns that reforms can work in Greece. The country is now in its 5th year of recession. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said borrowing as a way to increase growth would be a step backward. The leader of Europe's biggest economy told her country's parliament, growth through structural reform is important and necessary. Growth through debt would throw us back to the beginning of the crisis. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. To read, listen, and learn English with stories about economics and other topics, go to voaspecialenglish.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook at VOA Learning English.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. Finance ministers from the Euro area met in Poland in the middle of September to discuss the Greek debt crisis. American Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner joined them. Fabian Zulig, chief economist at the European Policy Center in Brussels, said the United States was right to get involved. The intervention from the U.S. has also shown at least a risk that the stability of the financial system as a whole, the global financial system, might be under threat again. Earlier, the leaders of France, Germany, and Greece held a conference call to discuss how to contain Europe's deepening financial crisis. Germany and France are Europe's 2 largest economies. 17 European Union countries use the euro as their currency. On September 15th, 5 major central banks agreed to lend additional dollars to European banks in the Eurozone. The European Central Bank says the 3-month loans will provide as many dollars as the banks need. The operations will end in December. The European Central Bank is acting with the United States Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, the Bank of Japan, and the Swiss National Bank. The announcement helped lift European bank shares and major European stock lists. The Paris-based Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has lowered its growth estimates for the euro area. In Greece, the economy has shrunk this year. German Chancellor Angela Merkel urged Eurozone nations to do everything possible to avoid an uncontrolled insolvency by Greece. On September 13th, she warned that problems would quickly spread if Greece failed to pay its international rescue loans. And, she said, if the euro fails, Europe fails. The next day, European Commission President José Manuel Barroso spoke to the European Parliament. He announced that the Commission would propose creating euro bonds. The idea is for Eurozone governments to jointly guarantee their debts. Germany and France have opposed such bonds. Mr. Barroso also said the current system that lets individual countries easily block policy is not working. I am convinced we need a deeper and more results-driven integration. A system based purely on intergovernment cooperation has not worked in the past and will not work in the future. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.